Have you ever stopped to notice if your shadow is actually moving in perfect sync with you? If tonight you feel it lagging even a split second behind, get out of the house. Today's story follows an urban explorer named Mark who made the mistake of opening a red door inside a long abandoned asylum. He had no idea that waiting behind that door was a version of himself he wasn't meant to see. And now, that same door might be manifesting in your own home. By the time this story ends, you might find it impossible to ever sleep in the dark again. This isn't my story. It belongs to an urban explorer named Mark. Mark ran a small YouTube channel where he investigated abandoned buildings and derelict hospitals. On a humid night in August 2025, he decided to trek out to the Blackwood Mental Asylum, located about 40 miles outside the city, buried deep within the woods. The facility had been abruptly shut down in the 1970s. Locals claimed the doctors conducted experiments on patients that defied human understanding. Mark went in alone, which was his first mistake. Mark turned on his GoPro and climbed in through a shattered window. The air inside was heavy and stagnant with dust. Paint was peeling off the walls in thick, jagged flakes. Mark clicked on his tactical flashlight and started down the long hallway. Suddenly, he heard the crunch of footsteps behind him. Crunch, crunch, like heavy boots stepping on broken glass. Mark spun around instantly. There was nothing there. He told himself it was just a stray animal. Mark reached the third floor. He came across a room with a deep red X painted on the door. Inside sat a rusted surgical table. On top of the table lay a single surgical blade. It was pristine and gleaming, as if it had just been sanitized for immediate use. That's when Mark heard a whisper. Mark, put the camera down. His blood froze. He was supposed to be alone. How did anyone know his name? He panned his light toward the corner. An old wheelchair was there, slowly rocking back and forth on its own, as if an invisible person was sitting there, watching him. Mark's instinct was to bolt, but he remembered his goal was the basement, where most of the activity had been reported. As he descended the basement stairs, the temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. There was a corridor that seemed to stretch on forever. At the very end was a bright red door. While the rest of the building was rotting, this door looked brand new. Mark tried the handle, but it was locked from the inside. Then someone peered through the small glass porthole in the door. Mark flashed his light at it. What he saw made him scream. On the other side stood a man wearing the exact same hoodie and the exact same GoPro as Mark. The man looked identical to him, except his eyes were solid, milky white. The fake Mark smiled slowly, pulled a key from his pocket, unlocked the door from the inside, and began to step out. Mark ran for the stairs like a madman, but when he reached the first floor, he realized the exits were gone. Where the windows used to be, there were now solid brick walls. He heard those heavy footsteps behind him again. Thump, 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 and this time they were sprinting. Whatever that thing was, it was hunting him. Mark scrambled into a small, pitch-black utility closet and pulled the door shut. He killed his camera so the LED light wouldn't give him away. He sat there in the dark, trembling. Then the footsteps stopped right outside the closet door. He heard heavy, ragged breathing, and then a low voice began to hum a melody. It was the same lullaby Mark's mother used to sing to him when he was a child. The closet door creaked open. Mark held his breath. No one was there, but the hallway had transformed. It wasn't a ruin anymore. Everything looked brand new. The lights were humming. He saw nurses and doctors wheeling patients past him. He realized he had either slipped back in time or into another dimension. He tried to grab a nurse's arm, but his hand passed right through her. He was a ghost in this version of reality. Then he saw doctors wheeling a patient into that same room with the red door. When he leaned in to look, the patient was Mark himself. His real self was lying there, and the doctors were prepping him for surgery. Mark knew that if that surgery finished, he'd never leave that place. He screamed and lunged for the light switch on the wall to cut the power. This time, his hand made solid contact. The moment the lights went out, the world shook. The walls decayed back into ruins instantly. Mark didn't look back. He sprinted toward the red door, which was now hanging wide open. He burst through it and ran into the woods until he reached his car. When he finally got home and checked his GoPro footage, there was no asylum. For the entire 25 minutes, Mark was just sitting in a deep, muddy trench in the middle of the woods, talking to himself. The video ended with him suddenly jumping up and running away from his own shadow. To this day, Mark doesn't know where he actually was that night, inside the asylum or lost in a dark corner of his own mind. When Mark watched that footage in his car, he thought it was over, but the true horror began once he got home. He tossed his camera and hard drive onto his desk and crashed into bed. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the silence of his room was shattered by a glitching sound. Static, crackle. It was coming from his laptop. It had turned itself on. Mark's eyes snapped open, and he saw the Blackwood Asylum footage playing on the screen. But this time, the video was different. He wasn't sitting in a trench anymore. He was standing directly in front of that red door. In the video, Mark's double turned to the camera, revealed those solid, milky white eyes, and whispered, "You left your keys behind, Mark." The temperature in Mark's bedroom plummeted. He felt a heavy, rhythmic breathing coming from right underneath his bed. He summoned the courage to look, but there was nothing there, only fresh, muddy footprints on the hardwood floor. They were the same elongated, distorted prints he had seen in the basement. Then his phone buzzed. A notification appeared. His own YouTube channel had started a live stream. The title was Mark's Last Investigation. With trembling hands, he opened the stream. The camera angle was from outside his bedroom window, looking in. He looked at the window in real life. It was empty, but on the screen he could see a tall, dark shadow standing right against the glass. Mark bolted for the hallway, desperate to leave the house, but as he flung open his living room door, he hit a dead stop. His front door was gone. In its place stood that same rotted yet vibrant red door. The walls of his apartment began to decay, transforming into the peeling, grime-stained hallways of Blackwood Asylum. He was trapped in his own home, which was now a labyrinthine hospital. From behind him came a low humming. This time, it wasn't his mother's voice. It was the raspy, clinical tone of an old man. "Patient 402, your procedure was left unfinished." Mark reached for the handle of the red door. This time, it swung open easily. Inside was his own bedroom, but his actual self was lying there fast asleep. It hit him like a physical blow. The Mark that had been running this whole time was actually the shadow that had escaped the asylum that night. The person in the bed was the real Mark. Suddenly, the Mark in the bed opened his eyes. He grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand and shone it directly at the camera, directly at the shadow Mark. "You're back again, Mark," the real Mark said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. He reached under his pillow and pulled out that same gleaming surgical blade, and as he did, the entire feed cut to white noise. The next day, neighbors called the police because of a foul smell coming from the apartment. The police found no trace of Mark. All they found was a room painted entirely in deep red and an old GoPro on the floor, playing footage that was 50 years old. The police had sealed the room, but the nightmare didn't end there. 60 miles away, in a cramped apartment, lived a guy named Ryan. Ryan was a tech specialist who made a living recovering unrecoverable data. An anonymous client had sent him that old GoPro found in Mark's red-painted room. The police had written it off as junk, but Ryan felt something massive was hidden inside. Ryan connected the camera to his workstation. The disk appeared empty, but when he ran a deep sector scan, a hidden file surfaced. It was titled
shadow transfer. As the video played, the red door appeared on the screen, but this time the camera was behind the door. Inside the room sat dozens of figures, all wearing the exact same hoodie and GoPro as Mark. They were sitting in a circle, chanting in unison. Ryan realized then that Blackwood Asylum wasn't a hospital. It was a processing center where shadows were detached from their hosts. Suddenly, Ryan's monitor began to flicker violently. One of the marks in the video slowly turned and looked directly into the lens, directly at Ryan. He whispered, "Ryan, do not look behind you." Ryan's skin crawled. Every light in his apartment cut out simultaneously. From the corner of the room, he heard that familiar crunch, crunch, the sound of heavy boots on glass. He slowly angled his desk mirror to see what was behind him. There was no person there, but his own shadow had detached itself from the wall and was now crawling across the floor. Ryan lunged for the door, but it was deadlocked. A voice shrieked from his computer speakers. It was Mark's voice, distorted and terrified. "It'll take you too. This camera is the portal." Black smoke began to pour out of the computer's cooling vents. The smoke solidified, taking on
a human shape. It looked exactly like Ryan, but its eyes were those same milky, hollow voids. The fake Ryan reached down, picked up a hard drive from the desk, and swallowed it whole. Just like Mark's home, Ryan's apartment began to rot. The walls decayed into grime-stained concrete, and the air filled with the stench of stagnant water and old blood. Ryan looked out his window. The city was gone. Outside was nothing but a dense black forest and the silhouette of the Blackwood Asylum standing on a distant hill. He realized too late that by booting up that camera, he had triggered the shadow protocol. He was now part of the loop. Ryan turned on his own GoPro for one last recording. He stared into the lens and said, "If you are watching this, never try to recover data from an abandoned source. Blackwood is still active. They take your shadow and they lock you behind the red door." As he finished his sentence, the red door manifested behind him and swung open. A long, pale hand with spindly fingers reached out and dragged Ryan into the darkness. The camera hit the floor and the recording cut to black. The next morning, that same GoPro was packed into a courier box, arriving at the doorstep of yet another urban explorer. The cycle was beginning again.